Monday, it's kind of quiet. Good afternoon. As you all know, the president will be speaking this afternoon in Louisville, and we've got an event coming up, so I'll try to keep this relatively short to focus on, let the president focus on his message for the day. In regard to the news of the day, this morning, after receiving his daily intelligence briefing, the president met with Bill Gates, the co-chair and trustee of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The president and Mr. Gates talked about their shared commitment to finding and stopping disease outbreaks around the world. The president particularly commended Mr. Gates for the Gates Foundation work in global health and health security. Generous and innovative private philanthropic groups like the Gates Foundation are critical to our mission of finding the cures for tomorrow. Also this morning, the confirmation hearings in the Judiciary Committee began for the president's nominee for the Supreme Court, Judge Neil Gorsuch. As the judge will continue to show throughout his process, he's eminently qualified for this position with impeccable academic credentials, a brilliant legal mind, and a proven commitment to the Constitution. On Tuesday and Wednesday, Judge Gorsuch will be questioned by each member of the panel, and on Thursday we anticipate things to conclude with a panel of witnesses. The president was glad to see so many people convey their support in the last few days for Judge Gorsuch. Just this past weekend, Senator Grassley, former New York Mayor Bloomberg, editorial boards from across the country, and several of his former colleagues and classmates either penned op-eds and editorials or provided comments in one way or another stating his impeccable qualifications for the bench. As they add to the long list of jurists, politicians, and elected officials from both sides of the aisle who have already given the judge their support. The president looks forward to watching Judge Gorsuch continue to show the Senate what an extraordinary addition he will be to the bench, and he's confident that he will be confirmed. Later in the morning, the president had a meeting with Speaker Ryan, Secretary of Health and Human Services, Dr. Tom Price, and Dr. Zeke Emanuel. Dr. Emanuel has been intimately involved in crafting healthcare policy since his work on Obamacare. Obviously, he and the president have some differing views on the best way to make healthcare affordable and accessible, but the president also strongly believes that the health and well-being of the American people shouldn't always be a partisan issue, and he will continue to reach across party lines and listen to voices on this issue. Last week, he heard from individuals and families who have suffered from the disastrous results of Obamacare. He's previously spoken to healthcare policy groups, Republican congressional leadership, and health insurance companies. This week, he and his staff will have discussions on women in healthcare while continuing an open dialogue with members of Congress. And he will be hosting even more meetings and listening sessions in the coming weeks as he works with Congress to bring common sense reforms to our healthcare system. The president has shown that he's willing to hear from all stakeholders in the healthcare field, and he will continue to listen as the process on the American Health Care Act moves along and we pursue the additional legislative and administrative actions necessary. This afternoon, the president had lunch with the vice president, and as we speak, he's meeting with Secretary of State Tillerson. The secretary just returned from an important trip to Asia. He made it clear that America is committed to our allies, Japan and the Republic of Korea, and that we expect China to increase its role in persuading North Korea to move away from nuclear weapon and ballistic missile development and towards steps to create a better future for the North Korean people. This trip set the stage for future leader level engagement between the U.S. and China. During this meeting, he will debrief the president on his trip. Later this afternoon, the president will welcome the Prime Minister al-Abadi of Iraq. The Iraqi people have been a brave and steadfast partner in our shared fight against ISIS, al-Qaeda, and radicalism. The president will speak with the Prime Minister about how that partnership will help defeat ISIS and move into a new era in which Iraq is a force for stability and peace in a prosperous Middle East. After his bilateral meeting with the Prime Minister, the president will depart the White House for Louisville, Kentucky, for a Make America Great Again rally before returning to the White House later this evening. A few notes at the end before I take some questions. Yesterday, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin returned from a very successful trip to Europe, where he stopped in the UK for a bilateral with the Chancellor of the Exchequer and later met with 18 of his counterparts during the G20 ministerial in Baden-Baden. This trip gave the Secretary an opportunity to outline the administration's priorities on a number of issues, including macroeconomic policy, financial regulation, international tax, and illicit finance. During the meetings, the Secretary and his counterparts presented a platform that will strengthen our collective work on steps to promote growth and financial stability. In terms of the schedule for the rest of the week, tomorrow the President will sign S-442, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration Transition Authorization Act of 2017 in the morning, and make remarks at the National Republican Congressional Committee March dinner in the evening. On Wednesday, as I mentioned last week, the President will meet with the Congressional Black Caucus. On Thursday, the President will hold an event with truck drivers and representatives from the trucking companies and industry on health care and its negative impacts on their industry and livelihood, which just happens to be the largest employer in 29 states. And on Friday, the President will hold a Greek Independence Day celebration. We'll have further updates on all of those events later. And finally, I want to address the House Intelligence Committee hearing that is currently happening, in which the FBI Director and the NSA Director are currently testifying, and comment to the extent that I can at this time. This hearing, as Chairman Nunes noted, is the first of several that the House Intelligence Committee is engaged in, and the President is happy that they're pursuing the facts in this. As has been previously reported, Director Comey confirmed that the FBI is investigating Russia's role in interfering with the election, and let me just comment briefly on that. Following this testimony, it's clear that nothing has changed. Senior Obama intelligence officials have gone on record to confirm that there is no evidence of a Trump-Russia collusion. The Obama CIA director said so, Obama's director of national intelligence said so, and we take them at their word. However, there was some new information that came from the hearing that we believe is newsworthy about the intelligence gathering process and the unmasking of Americans identified in intelligence reports and the illegal leak of such unmasked individuals, which is a federal crime. Director Comey told the House Intelligence Committee that certain political appointees in the Obama administration had access to the names of unmasked U.S. citizens, such as senior White House officials, senior Department of Justice officials, and senior intelligence officials. Before President Obama left office, Michael Flynn was unmasked, and then illegally his identity was leaked out to media outlets, despite the fact that, as NSA Director Rogers said, that unmasking and revealing individuals endangers, quote, national security. Not only was General Flynn's identity made available, Director Comey refused to answer the question on whether or not he had actually briefed President Obama on his phone calls and activities. Director Comey called these types of disclosures of classified information a threat to national security and said he will investigate and pursue these matters to the full extent of law. He also said that the leaking of classified information had become, quote, unusually active in the time frame in question. It's also important to note that both Directors Comey and Rogers told the committee that they have no evidence that votes were changed in the swing states the president had won. John.
He said, he said that there is no information to support the allegations that the president made against President Obama
at this time.
So is the president prepared to withdraw that accusation and apologize to the president?
No, we started a hearing. It's still ongoing. And then, as Chairman Nunes mentioned, this is one in a series of hearings that will be happening. I think there's, as I noted last week, there's also a lot of interesting news coming out of that in terms of the activities that have gone on to reveal the information on American citizens that have been part of this, particularly General Flynn. There's a lot of things that aren't being covered in this hearing that I think are interesting. That since it's ongoing, I'll leave that for now. But I think there's a lot of areas that still need to be covered. There's a lot of information that still needs to be discussed.
I just have two quick questions on the hearing today. Does the president, now that we know that there is an ongoing investigation by the FBI, does the president stand by his comments that he's not aware of any contacts that his campaign associates had with Russia during the election?
Yes.
Okay, and then the second.
Hey, Jonathan, hold on. Can you stop interrupting other people's questions? Hey, Jonathan, somebody's asking a question. It's not your press briefing. Julie's asking a question. Please calm down, Julie.
You already know what the
No. What I'm getting at is that there is this media narrative that continues to talk about collusion that exists, and yet every person that's been briefed, Nunes, Tom Cotton, Chris Coons, Democrat of Delaware, Clapper, the Obama appointee, have all said that nothing that they've seen makes them believe that there was any collusion. And I think there's a difference between talking about an investigation into the 2016 election, which we all know, and any evidence of collusion. There is no evidence, according to the people that have been briefed, of any collusion or activity that leads them to believe that exists. I think that is an important point that gets overlooked over and over and over again.
It's fine to look into it, but they are going to come to the same conclusion of everybody else, that this conclusion doesn't exist. So you already know.
No, I don't.
When
What
the
I'm
investigation's finished,
no,
that's it.
no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that every single person, because what the director said today is that there's an ongoing investigation. My point is to say that everybody who's been briefed on that investigation, there's an assumption that because there's an investigation, it must mean that it's about something. My point to you is that there's an assumption on behalf of most people in the media about what that investigation must mean. And my point to you is that despite the narrative that gets played over and over again with respect to what the investigation might mean in terms of collusion, every person, Republican and Democrat, that's been briefed on it has come to the same conclusion that there is no collusion.
Thanks, Sean. On a slightly different topic, in his first 8 weeks in office, President Trump has made at least 10 trips to the golf course. He regularly used to criticize President Obama for spending time on the course. How is his golf game any different?
Well, I think two things. One is you saw him utilize this as an opportunity with Prime Minister Abe to help foster deeper relationships in Southeast Asia, and have a growing relationship that's going to help U.S. interests. How you use the game of golf is something that he's talked about. Secondly, we went to he had a mini cabinet meeting the other day 2 weekends ago down at his club in Virginia. And I remember so many people jumping to the conclusion that he was going down and playing golf. Just because you go somewhere doesn't necessarily mean that you did it. So on a couple occasions, he's actually conducted meetings there. He's actually had phone calls. So just because he heads there doesn't mean that's what's happening. So let's.
The president believed the FBI will do a fair job of investigating any sort of links to Russia during the election. And then I have one more for you.
I think there's a variety of institutions looking at it, both the House and the Senate Intelligence Committee, the FBI. But yeah, I mean, I think that when you get to the bottom of it, we'll have a much better picture of what's happening, and I think it'll continue to vindicate him on that. Go ahead.
In the follow-up, the president tweeted this morning a question about a potential DNC connection to Russia during the election.
Right.
Is he under the impression that the Clinton campaign had inappropriate contact with Russia during the election?
Well, I think that and that's an interesting aspect of all of this that's not being covered. Number one, from everything that has been publicly available, on several occasions, the DNC was asked by the FBI to investigate or to allow their servers to be looked at, despite all of the claims of their concerns about leaking. And yet the question still doesn't come out. Why wouldn't the DNC on multiple occasions rebuff the FBI? Why were they not wanting, if they were so concerned about hacks and leaking, why did the DNC not ask the FBI to come look? Not only did they not ask them, they rebuffed them on multiple occasions. And that's why I think, with all due respect to your two headlines coming out, I do believe there's a lot of headlines coming out. It's just that the only headlines that people want to write are the ones that support a narrative against this administration and not one that actually looks into, how many times do people say that there was no evidence of something happening, how many times or how much classified information is being leaked. There's a lot of headlines that should be written today about a lot of the stuff that's ongoing. And I know that we have an ongoing hearing, but there's a lot of other things that need to get discussed and aren't being happening. Why did the DNC not let the FBI look at their servers? Why has that story not getting in? Because I would assume that if somebody was victim of something, which they've yelled from the rooftops. Hold on.
I'm sorry. I'm curious. The implication of that is
No.
what?
The question is, why is none of that being looked at?
Question, but
I don't know what but my point is that not to draw an implication, but to merely ask a question. Which all I'm getting at is that suddenly none of the questions regarding any of this seem to get asked or answered or explored, and yet
You won.
You're here, Brian. You get the same treatment that Jonathan does. That doesn't mean you get to jump in. So the answer that I'm getting at is why are none of those questions being asked? Why is no one taking no for an answer when it comes to all of these individuals saying